So I'm carefully tracking everything that's going on with Wickoff, with Trump's future meeting with Putin, and everything revolving around that. That's what we're going to talk about here. So we're going to start with this. He misinterpreted Russia's demand for a peaceful withdrawal of Ukrainians from Kherson and Zaporizhia as an offer of peaceful withdrawal by the Russians from these regions. Bild reported on it, and I was like, I felt like I was out in a limb. I'm not the only one talking about this now. It looks like that is what happened. If we look at this, the commentary here is Wickoff is a complete imbecile who told European leaders directly or through Trump 3 different things on 3 different days about key aspects of Putin's proposal. I don't like Wickoff any further than I could throw him. I don't think the guy is the right guy to be doing diplomatic work, let alone having his hand in every little bit of diplomatic work, whether it's Israel and Iran or the Azerbaijani, Armenian diplomatic relations or Ukraine and Russia. He shouldn't be anywhere near this. He should just go back to his real estate deal. Okay, the European counterproposal concludes a week of frantic diplomacy triggered by Putin's overture to Wickoff. Trump summoned a call with select European leaders and Zelensky to brief them. Okay, Russia, in the first iteration, it looked like Russia would be ready to withdraw from the southern region of Zaporizhia and Kherson, right? And Kherson in exchange for full control of Donetsk. That was what we first thought was on the table. Not great, but it's at least something. Wickoff walked that back the next day, suggesting that Russia would both withdraw from and freeze the front line, meaning Russia got to keep the front line where it was, keeping those portions of those Zaporizhia and Kherson. European officials demanded a third call with Wickoff. Understanding what was going on, Wickoff clearly stated the only offer on the table was for Ukraine to withdraw unilaterally from Donetsk in exchange for a ceasefire. That's it. That's it. Like, he made it sound like something different than what it was. So once Putin's true plan became apparent, it was immediately rejected by both Zelensky and European officials. So European officials were saying quite a bit now, and I showed you some of that yesterday. I'm going to show you some more. Now, this was really bad. When you're a diplomat, you got to be really careful about what you say. NATO's ambassador, Matthew Whitaker, on Ukraine's territorial concessions, he said, no big chunks or sections are going to be just given that haven't been fought for or earned on the battlefield. It's kind of a bad way of saying this. Earned. Since when do U.S. diplomats describe imperial invasion and occupation in this way? It's shocking. I get what he's trying to say, but it's like it's stolen. Like you could say the same thing in 2 different ways. He calls that earned. I call it stolen. All right. Ukraine's president says the war's end must serve European security interests. Zelensky expressed gratitude to the EU for support while backing a 7-leader statement that demands specific security guarantees before any Trump-Putin negotiations on ending the war. Okay, so that's good. You have to get to that. Here it is in Euromaidan press. Your Ukrainian leader emphasized the country's support for a joint declaration by major European leaders regarding peace in Ukraine. So right away, on it were Macron and Meloni, Merz, Tusk, Keir Starmer, and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Finnish President Alexander Stubb. They were all over this like white on rice. So that was good. And then we saw this. There was a Nordic-Baltic leaders who just issued a joint statement saying that the path to peace cannot be charted without Ukraine's voice. No decisions on Ukraine without Ukraine. No decisions on Europe without Europe. Look, Finland had big chunks of it ripped away from it, Sweden too, from Russia, by Russia rather. And the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they were enfolded into the Soviet Union against their will. So they're pretty hawkish about this. Here's what they had to say. Let's look at this. We stand firm in our unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's illegal war of aggression. We welcome the initiative of President Trump to help bring this war to an end and to lay the foundations for a just and enduring peace that ensures Ukraine's security and the stability of Europe. We stand ready to contribute to work diplomatically while maintaining our substantial military and financial support to Ukraine. We will continue to uphold and impose restrictive measures against the Russian Federation. Peace will only come through a combination of determined diplomacy, unwavering support for Ukraine, and consistent pressure on the Russian Federation to halt its unlawful war. We share the conviction that a diplomatic solution must safeguard the vital security interests of both Ukraine and Europe. These interests include robust and credible security guarantees that enable Ukraine to effectively defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We reaffirm the principle that international borders must not be changed by force, which is exactly what's happening right now. They're changing the international borders by force, and if they can do this, international law means very little. Negotiations can only take place in the context of a ceasefire. President Zelensky has stated clearly that Ukraine is ready for peace talks in full respect of its sovereignty. 152 days worth of this. The people of Ukraine must have the freedom to decide their future. The path to peace cannot be charted without Ukraine's voice. No decision on Ukraine without Ukraine. No decisions on Europe without Europe. The Nordic Baltic 8 will remain on Ukraine's side, united in purpose and resolute in defense of our security. We will continue to work closely with the United States, Ukraine, as well as other partners, and seek a peace that is just, lasting, and rooted in the principles of the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and international law. Pretty strong statement, if you ask me. I mean, that's what they were saying here. Now, Gabriel Landsbergis, former foreign minister from Lithuania, is a little less optimistic about what is going to happen. With all due respect to Europeans, emphasizing the Ukrainians and Europeans need to be at the table. Yes, I agree. But to achieve what? As U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz famously said, negotiations are a euphemism for capitulation in the shadow of power, if the shadow of power is not cast across the bargaining table. Okay. Now, Shultz was dealing, like, I think that was Reagan administration or Bush. He was dealing in a context of like Cold War, right? You have to project power. What have we achieved in the last 6 months that would strengthen Ukraine's position? What shadow are we prepared to cast? Or is this just one more episode in the attempt to lead us into accepting Ukraine's capitulation? So that's what we're afraid of, that Trump's going to make some kind of deal that's going to lead to capitulation. I don't think Trump has the power to actually make a deal that would lead to capitulation. He can't force it to happen. Like, he could say, okay, well, we're not going to sell you any more stuff, but I just don't see that part happening. Okay, let's keep going. Fico from Slovakia calls Ukraine grass in a dispute between elephants. Fico really just doesn't seem to get it. He said this, and again, this just could be poorly worded, but it seems like when people talk about Ukraine, sometimes they talk about it as if they don't actually exist or matter or have their own agency. He says this, quote, "It doesn't matter whether elephants fight or have sex, the grass suffers. This is the case. In this case, Ukraine." The grass suffers. So, Ukraine's just grass where elephants are fighting. Yeah, it's just such a bad look. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was on one of the daily Sunday morning talk shows. What happened on Friday is testing Putin by President Trump. And again, he said some other things, but his core point was this. But on Friday, it's important to see how serious Putin is. Like, Trump's trying to get a beat on whether Putin is serious about negotiations or whether he's just continuing to do the same stuff. My great fear about the Trump-Putin meeting is that Putin's going to spend more of his time talking about the great deals in the future, trying to lure Trump back into that kind of orbit rather than actually trying to make a deal. Okay, Zelensky will most likely be in Alaska during the Trump-Putin meeting. He won't be in the meeting. Putin certainly wouldn't show up if he's in the meeting, but he'll find out very shortly thereafter what's going to be happening with that. So Zelensky will be there, according to CNN. Now, what's the thing with Alaska? Russians see Alaska as like their former territory that they should somehow reclaim. I'll do a whole video about this, I think. But in 1991 already, Russian band Lyub, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, has composed a song, "Don't Be Silly America," with a call to give us back Alaska, our native Russian land. How about that? I'm not going to play this. It doesn't sound good, and I don't really want to have the copyright issue, but yeah, how about that? Okay. Ryan Macbeth and his take on the Alaska-Trump meeting, like what's going to happen, and here's his take.
President Trump is going to meet with President Putin next week in Alaska to talk about ending the war in Ukraine. Two funny things about this. Number one, apparently Ukraine wasn't invited to this. And number two, boy, that had to have been a tough sell. I mean, you're sending Putin to a land his forefathers gave up, and you're sending Trump to a place that has the fewest golf courses of any state in America. That's true, look it up. Now, apparently Putin is willing to stop the war if Ukraine gives him the Donbass, which has been a region that has been contested between Ukraine and Russia essentially since 2014. And
it's more than just the Donbass. Ukraine has to give it all up. And this is the thing about it. I think Putin's going to overplay his hand and just ask for everything in the kitchen sink. It can go a couple of different ways. One way is that Trump, gives into everything. Another way is that he gets miffed that, like, you're not serious about this. I mean, you're talking all this game, but you're not actually serious. Okay, let's get back to our video. Whoops, I got to the wrong thing here. Well, here we are. Yep.
The Donbass, which has been a region that has been contested between Ukraine and Russia essentially since 2014. And I've been saying this since 2022. The way this war ends is not with total victory by either side. The way this ends is both sides lose, and eventually there's some sort of peacekeeping force in the Donbass. But here's the problem. Even if Ukraine gives Russia the Donbass in exchange for peace, Putin's goals in Ukraine have not been met yet.
Yep.
That means he needs to go back to the oligarchs, the people who lost money financing this stupid, pointless war, and say to them, hey, you know what we got for your billions of rubles and your hundreds of thousands of lives? A territory the size of West Virginia that's completely destroyed. And that's how you end up hanging upside down outside a gas station like Mussolini. So I don't really see any kind of peace deal coming from this summit, mainly because if Putin agrees to any kind of peace without actually taking over all of Ukraine and accomplishing their goals, he will not be long for this world.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the case, but I think Putin is really careful about he needs to show something for all this effort. Remember, it was supposed to be a 3-day war. Okay. Meanwhile, the founder of Samolet, largest real estate development company in Russia, suddenly died at age 57. Now, this happens. People die, but it's just suspicious. And there was another oligarch that went to jail, and another one before that went to jail a week before that, and then another one that died like a month ago. And it's some really weird things going on. He belonged to the Shoigu clan of Putin's mafia. Assassination is suspected, especially if Samolet's assets end up being stolen and the company bankrupted in the near future. So there's that. This kind of thing keeps happening. I should actually spend time tracking this kind of thing. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin appears to have teamed up with General Haftar, the military strongman who controls much of eastern Libya, to facilitate a wave of illegal migration into the European Union bloc. This comes from Philip Obagi. Philip Obagi spends his time tracking all the bad things that Russia does on the African continent. And Darth Putin posted this. This often comes in one of the early symptoms of terminal window cancer. By terminal, I mean velocity. Well, this general, Alexander Lapin, who was just relieved or resigned of command as the commander of the Leningrad Military District and Sever Group. Now, I saw another article about this. Somebody else is taking over that, and that's probably bad news for him. We'll see how that plays out. A couple last things. The Baltics. Now, this is on Russian propaganda TV. The Baltics are a geopolitical misunderstanding. Who wants to burn a nuclear Armageddon for the Baltics? Well, who? So Russian propagandists are already talking about Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn in 3 days. They're already talking about that. It's unbelievable that they're still doing that. Finally, I'll leave you with this. Even if Russia did sign a peace agreement, is this scenario likely to be repeated? Russia violated over 20 ceasefires in Ukraine since 2014. Feeling optimistic? Remember this peace treaty? This was between Russia and Chechnya. 3 years later, Chechnya was ruined. Yep, that's the way it works. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you right now. Thank you for your time. Please put your comments below what you thought about what you saw here. I read the comments as much as I can. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.